If ever your life could be a true crime podcast episode, then this podcast is for you. We're about to embark on a roller coaster of emotions, insights, survival, and stories about escape. So buckle up and let the journey begin.
Good day, all, and welcome back into the Escape Pod. I'm Julie.
I'm Charity. Good day, Julie.
I haven't done that one in a while.
Yeah.
I was doing it like regularly, and then I stopped.
Good day.
I will admittedly tell you that I do think about how I'm going to start it before I start it.
Does that make it?
It makes it like real, like we're going. Almost like it's scripted, but it's not scripted.
Okay.
But I need like a way that I know I'm going to start.
That's your training, though.
Do you know the other day I had to present to some kiddos about what One Heart is, where we work here in Rapid City. And it's such a big program and such a tough thing for people, even adults sometimes, to wrap their heads around what all we're doing here, that for like 24 hours, whenever I would think about, I have to go to the Scouts.
I gotta break this down to little kids,
How am I going to break this down and put it in? And, you know, they are little enough, like you want them to understand people have had tough spots in life without
traumatizing them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think I did okay. I did check in with the leader of the group after I left to make sure that it was all right. And he thought it was great. So I was like, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Because I just kept going over it in my head. Fifth graders.
Okay.
Fifth graders, all boys, and their parents. So they were a good little audience. And I tried not to talk too long because, you know, attention spans are limited, even with adults, but especially with like 11-year-olds.
Yeah.
So yeah, but it was fine. But I did stress about it more than I would a lot of presentations.
It's always, I'm sorry.
You're
I just
good.
Kick you across the table. I don't know. I do that too, but I think the more I think about it,
almost the worse it is.
Yeah. And then I can never stick to a script anyway. Like I am so much better if I'm just caught off guard and I can just go.
I don't know what the balance is. Yeah, I need just like notes so that there's some key things that and notes could
like
be,
if you don't want to forget certain things. Yeah.
The PowerPoint where it triggers certain, you know, stats and things that I need to share. But yeah, it was good. So what are you escaping this week?
What am I escaping this week?
So many things. Try to pick one.
I'm going to pick one, and I'm not going to put any one particular salon on blast. But after the couple of weeks because we haven't seen each other for several
it's been
weeks.
a couple weeks.
Yeah. My daughter and I really went through it in Rochester as we're preparing my 87-year-old mother-in-law for her move that she did not want to
do. Yeah.
But I mean, hands were beat up, feet, bodies, mind, emotions, like all the stuff. So we had a few days of self-care when we got back home. And one of those days we went and got manis and pedis together. Sierra's was great. I'm watching her nail like everything was great. She got her hands massaged and her feet massaged and all this stuff, which is
what you pay for.
What you're paying for. Take a look at my fingernails, Miss Julie.
Oh, no. They're
Look
cracked.
at these edges.
Yeah.
This is the worst. A 5-year-old could have given me this manicure. It was terrible. And it was so dark in there. And I kept saying, can you see what you're doing? But Sierra's looked great.
Interesting.
I did not get a hand massage. I did not get a foot massage.
I mean, that's the reason I go.
I know.
I care less about the nails getting painted.
I was so tired.
Yeah.
And just mentally exhausted. I didn't want to fight with any other person, so I just left. I even tipped her, and she didn't deserve a freaking tip. But I mean, I don't know if she was overly caffeinated or what. I mean, she's like shaking or, you know, like what it was. But I'm just like, this is
maybe
bullshit.
She was a newbie who was nervous. I've had a newbie once take my blood, and it was when I was pregnant. And I still remember it well because my husband, after she left, was like, oh my gosh, I thought she was never going to hit the vein. And I have pretty clear veins.
Yeah.
But she was just young. And wouldn't you know, several years later, probably almost 10 years later, I had to have blood taken. Same clinic, totally different reason. And the nurse initially was like, I'll just do it. And then she said, I have to be honest, I don't draw blood very often, so I'm going to get one of the people who does. And I was like, okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, the person who walked in.
Was it the same one?
It was the same one. She got very good over the years. She was absolutely fine. But I do think sometimes we forget that, like, there's somebody out there today brand new at their job.
There's school for that. They have to pass school.
Yes.
You don't put them into a commercial setting on which you're trying to make money.
Correct.
For that kind of a job. It was just bad. So, and I don't normally, I don't want to make her feel bad.
Right.
I don't want to complain. I'm just
I'm that person too.
I'm just going to go. I knew I had a massage the next day, and I just had my normal masseuse take extra special care of my hands and feet since they got neglected. And
you were like, listen,
yeah.
I'm going to need some love.
Yeah.
Because the mani-pedi
It's all I wanted.
Yeah.
It's just all I wanted.
Oh my gosh. I had a massage therapist once who like my Achilles. I didn't even know my Achilles could hurt like that until she was massaging my Achilles. And I was like, oh my gosh, that might be the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
It was wild. I thought, who knew? You never know sometimes what hurts and why until you have like some targeted attention to it.
Well, I also think I am super spoiled. My husband is a great masseuse. I get a lot of massages.
Yeah.
And I've seen my husband now probably
he hasn't been around.
Well, you've been
crossing paths and that's
so
it.
maybe 5 days in the last 30 or something, right?
Yeah.
So I think I'm just falling apart now. I feel it. And but normalcy, I'm just really excited to get back to that because my house has been full of people and no one's in my house now.
Okay.
So I can get
a little peace.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun having the family around, but it's just a lot, especially when you're working and, yeah.
Yes, it is.
You want to go to bed at 8 o'clock.
Well, speaking of bed, I almost escaped work today for no good reason.
What'd you do?
I slept in and my child woke me up.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know what happened.
Did alarms go off? Or?
I think so. I think I just turned them off.
Oh, you must have needed it.
I think I did, but he came in and was like, is there a reason
is my mom alive? Was he scared?
Well, they had a 2-hour late start because of snow a couple of days ago.
Oh.
Not today.
Okay.
But I think he was thinking did we have another late start? Even though the weather's fine today. But anyway, so he thankfully came in and I said, what time is it?
Oh.
And he said 7:10. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, we got to get going. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Oh, I was so tired.
Do they have special passes when it's the parents' fault the kid's late?
They should, probably.
Don't blame my kid.
We were on time.
Good.
They should have been fine.
You must have hauled butt.
Oh, yeah. Fortunately, I still have boys who they don't take very long to get ready. It's me.
Yeah.
And I even am fairly low maintenance now compared to, what I was when I was younger and certainly when I was on TV. But a lot of that was done at the station.
Yeah.
You didn't put TV and makeup on at 8 o'clock in the morning,
right.
So, or fix my hair for that matter because I would have been redoing it.
Teach me how to do TV makeup.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how to do it.
I mean, I
never
didn't do it as well as a lot of people do. Yeah. Sometimes it's just the product. You just need the right stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of TV, you probably will be on TV next week.
Oh,
yes,
yay.
I'm working on it.
Yay.
I'm working on scheduling, just so you know.
Okay.
Just an FYI.
Yay, me.
We're in February. We blew right past our little anniversary.
I know. We had thought and kind of toyed around with doing
another Groundhog's Day.
Encore of the Groundhog's Day thing. And it just went there to go. I mean,
time flies.
I've been traveling and so...
Yeah, it came and went.
So it's just going to have to be maybe we re-air it or something.
Yeah.
It was funny.
We could do that.
It was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
Poor little
Good
traumatized
times.
Charlotte. Yeah.
So our topic today is much more serious than that one.
I was going to say in celebration of Black History Month, but it's not a celebration because... a lot of times the stories and features and stuff that come out during the month of February honoring Black history shows the accomplishments and all that kind of a thing. But I think what often gets overlooked is things that have happened in this country that have led to some of the stuff that now we deal with at One Heart, right?
Sure.
And this story it gripped me. It has been probably for a year.
Okay.
I've been sitting on this story. And it's a little bit longer one, I will say that, because there are 9 key players involved as far as the young, I'm going to say young men, but some of them were as young as 13 years old.
Okay.
So, I mean, these are children. I think the oldest one was 19. So they really are kids.
Teenagers, yeah.
But I don't want to call them boys, So it's just, I might use young men or, interchangeably instead of calling them children. So just a heads up on that. If you're, sensitive to anything racially motivated, you might want to skip this episode because, this is 1931.
In the Deep South.
In the Deep South, Scottsboro, Alabama. It's running rampant, Depression era. I mean, there's just a lot going on in our country at this time. And this story just makes me so angry. And I'd never heard it. Like, this is the kind of thing that we should be taught about. Like, actions have consequences, right? They should have consequences. The only people who received any consequences for lack of action in this story are these 9 young Black men.
Shoot.
So it's really infuriating. I mean, I would like to think this country has evolved in some extent,
but in other ways, we're probably worse.
But 1931, and here we are in 2025, and
right.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it's enough, Okay. So anyway, this is going to be one of those stories. So again, Great Depression era. You probably are familiar with how people would hitch train rides.
Yep.
Back in that time. They would go around. Sometimes it was just for entertainment because they didn't have a lot going on. Or they'd go around looking for work, trying to find a new job opportunity. And they called it hoboing at the time. They just hop on a freight train. It was like a pastime, something to keep them occupied because life sucked.
Yeah.
I mean, depression, nothing was going well for most people back then.
Correct.
And there had been at this time rumors of some log hauling jobs in Memphis. So a group of 12 or so young men, some white, some Black, and 2 females, both white, happened to be all on the train on this same time, during the same time, on the hunt for work on this fateful day in March 25th, 1931. So picture walking across the top of a tank car like they do in the movies. Okay. So young white guy steps on the hand of a Black kid named Haywood Patterson. So he's like hanging on the side of the train. He gets his finger stepped on. Whether it was intentional or not, to be debated, probably was intentional. I've also never walked across the top of a moving train, so
yeah,
I don't know.
It's hard to say.
But I would figure, like, if I were doing that, I'd be in the middle of the thing.
You would hope.
Not on the edges where someone's hands would be, so I don't know. But anyway, this happened. Patterson's friends saw this happen, and then they were like, we're not going to take this. So they got, I don't know how they had rocks, if they just had them on them, if that was a thing you carried around in your pocket. Like, I'm not sure. But they got into a rock throwing fight between a group of Black kids, and they're like 13 to 19 years old, and these white boys. Okay, so the Black kids, far outnumbering the white kids, forced all but one of them off the train. Like, you can just see people, flying off the train. And having been, like, disrespected, right, these white guys go and report that they were assaulted by a gang of Blacks. That's how they portrayed it to authorities. Word, of course, spreads quickly via wire back then. And they form a posse. They stop the train because this is horrendous. We're not going to take our poor, innocent white young men being assaulted by a gang of Blacks, right? So dozens of white men with guns charge the train, guns drawn, rounding up every young Black man that they could find.
Ooh.
So they just took vigilante justice, right? It was this was beyond the authorities. Everybody was up in arms.
Okay.
So the police ended up rounding up and arresting 9 of them and charging them with assault. Okay. Now, at the same time, there were 2 young white women, like I mentioned, Ruby Bates and Victoria Price. And because they stood out, when they were questioned by police, the women claimed that 12 Black men with pistols and knives raped them while on board the train. Why? because there was the Man's Act back then. Are you familiar with that?
Nope.
Okay. Man's Act criminalized the crossing of state lines for immoral purposes.
Okay.
And this particular train crossed the Alabama border. And so the girls had been with their boyfriends, and they'd been sexually active with their boyfriends. And so that could have put them in possible violation of the Mann Act. And so they lied in order to not get charged for having sex across a border. Okay.
Gotcha.
So to avoid facing all of this, they leveled these rape accusations at these young black men, knowing that it would be near impossible for them to have a voice and defend themselves, right? They couldn't fight it. So, and when Clarence Norris, who is one of these young boys, called the girls liars, he was beaten with a bayonet. Mm-hmm. So wasn't looking great, right? The 9 of them were sent to Scottsboro to await trial. Their names were Charlie Weems, Ozzie Powell, Clarence Norris, Andrew Wright, Leroy Wright, they were brothers, Olin Montgomery, Willie Robertson, Haywood Patterson, and Eugene Williams. And word gets out very quickly what these boys were accused of, to the extent that the Alabama National Guard had to be called in to prevent a lynching. Because angry mobs of white people were surrounding the jail and like guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah.
Or innocent until proven guilty. Like, which is it? You can guess, right? So it goes to trial quickly because they want their pound of flesh. Mm-hmm. So within 12 days, which is unheard of now.
Oh my gosh.
Right? So it goes to trial quickly, but there were tons of problems with the defense lawyers. Actually, the whole process was just a joke. So first of all, these defense lawyers, they wanted to try all 9 defendants together.
Okay.
Problem number 1. Some of these, they didn't even know each other. Maybe 4 of them knew each other.
Okay.
They didn't even know each other. Here are some of the craziest things. So I kind of looked through this trial and just highlighted some of the things that were exposed and should have been why are you wasting my time as a judge?
Uh-huh.
But here we go. Victoria Price was one of the witnesses. She testified that these young men, quote, told us they were going to take us north and make us their women or kill us, end quote. On a train that goes the other way. But who's to say? Okay. A doctor for the prosecution, no less, who examined the girls within 2 hours of the alleged gang rapes, confirmed that semen was found inside both women, but that there were no signs of bleeding or vaginal damage or distress, and that he also confirmed they were both calm and composed after being allegedly gang raped.
Right.
He also testified that semen lives for 12 to 48 hours after intercourse, and that the semen he examined was non-modal. So it was outside of that window, probably leading to the fact that their allegations were false.
Interesting.
Yeah. Fun fact number 3, the prosecution's only eyewitness was a farmer who said he saw the defendants grab Victoria Price and Bates as they were about to leap from the train. When asked how he could be sure it was women he saw, he said she was wearing women's clothing. Both of these girls were wearing overalls.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Another nugget I found that should have sent the jury in a different direction. Lester Carter was the 23-year-old traveling companion of Ruby and Victoria, and Victoria had previously denied knowing Lester, testified that when he met the women and Victoria's boyfriend Jack in a Huntsville hobo jungle the night before, that he and Ruby had sex while Victoria and her boyfriend also had sex. Mm-hmm. So like he's saying, I was part of this semen discussion that has been had. And it didn't matter at all. Ruby actually testified that there was no rape, that none of the defendants touched her or even spoke to her, and that the accusations of rape were made after Victoria Price told her to, quote, frame up a story, end quote, to avoid those morals charges.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that came out during trial?
Yep. Didn't matter a freaking bit. So cross-examinations were equally pathetic and infuriating and inconsistent. Inconsistencies in the women's stories, they were not drilled down into. Tons of misstatements. Didn't matter because 9 young black men were on trial, period.
Right.
And 6 of them denied ever having seen the 2 girls, let alone raping them.
Right.
Like, we didn't even know they were on the train. We hadn't laid eyes on them. The other 3 said that the gang rape did occur, but this was allegedly admitted to after enduring numerous beatings and threats. Oh. And we've talked about coercion.
Yep.
So at the end of the trial, with a Okay, don't be shocked. All white male jury.
Yeah.
All right. Convicted the 9 men, young men, boys, children, sentencing 8 of them to death. The 9th was 13-year-old Leroy Wright, and his trial resulted in a hung jury because one of the jurors wanted life in prison rather than the death penalty because he was a child.
13.
Yeah. A mistrial in his case was declared, and he sat in prison for 6 years.
Oh, my.
Waiting for the final verdicts of the other boys.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Okay, so now there's an organization coming onto the scene called the International Labor Defense, and they took on all of these young men's cases.
Okay.
They were granted a stay of execution pending appeal to the Alabama Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, they launched a crazy PR campaign to help free these young boys that included like rallies and parades and speeches, letters from prominent people, both white and black.
Okay.
They protested that these guilty verdicts were, BS, that the whole process was made up. I mean, the victims were telling the truth, the witnesses were not. And there were some pretty big holes in the stories. But all of these young men spent 2 years between their first and second rounds of trial on death row in Kilby Prison, suffering absolutely deplorable conditions.
I'm sure.
They could hear the inmates being electrocuted in the cell next to them. That is a special kind of torture. And not only that, sometimes they would have to carry the bodies of the just recently executed inmates. They were only allowed to leave their cells maybe once or twice a week to shower. They were moved into a rat-infested jail that had been previously condemned as unfit for white prisoners.
Wow.
So, and then some of them obviously were sodomized in prison. They were young. They didn't have protection, right? 1930 South. I'm sure you can guess what happened at the Alabama Supreme Court level.
Yeah.
Yeah. They upheld the convictions of 7 of the young men and granted Eugene Williams a new trial because he was a minor at the time of his conviction. Later that year, the U.S. Supreme Court in Powell versus Alabama ruled that these young men had been denied the right to counsel, violating their rights and due process under the 14th Amendment. They overturned the Alabama verdicts, thankfully, and then remanded the cases to the lower court. So now
the lower court is the problem.
Well, it's all the problem.
Yeah.
There's nothing but problems in this issue. So now there's a second round in circuit court, and this happens in Decatur, Alabama. Ruby Bates, again, one of the women who'd claimed she'd been raped by all of these young men, recanted her story and agreed to testify for the defense. And that should have been the Hail Mary, right?
Right.
It should have been. But it wasn't, because even with the accusation falling apart, a second all-white jury convicted Haywood Patterson, recommending once again the death penalty. They're just bent on that. And not only that, during this second trial, their new defense attorney, in his summation, called the accusations of Price the foul, contemptible, outrageous lie of an abandoned woman. He closed with the Lord's Prayer and an all-or-nothing appeal to the jury: acquit them or give them the chair. Like, you don't call somebody's bluff in a racially, oppressive area and think that's going to have a positive outcome. I think it was really irresponsible in that climate. And this is speculation, but there is perhaps some fear on the jurors' part that they were going to be attacked and at risk if they did the right thing.
Well, but still, you have to live with yourself.
I know.
That's my thing.
I know.
Ugh.
But now they're being told by the defense attorney it's either that or the death penalty. I think it's possible that his own grandstanding and his own ego worked against these young men.
Yeah.
Judge Horton, however, did not agree with this. He was convinced that Victoria Price was the liar she is, and he started doing his own homework. He started meeting with the medical examiners who had met with the women after they had allegedly been raped, and he was not convinced that these young men were guilty. So he suspended the death sentence and granted a new trial for Patterson, which kind of people would always wait and watch the one that was up, and then, but yet they're holding everybody in prison until, it's just really strange. Consequently, Judge Horton lost re-election the next year because he did the right thing.
Yeah.
So no good deed.
No.
Like we always say. And it just keeps going like this. There's appeals, there's retries, there's reconvictions, there's more death sentences. And so the ILD, had no choice but to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court again.
Okay.
So these 9 lives were on the line, and it was looking more and more and more like unavoidable that the accusers were completely full of crap.
Right.
So now we're in January of 1935. The Supreme Court overturned the guilty verdicts, ruling that the systematic exclusion of blacks on Jackson County juries denied a fair trial to the defendants. So,
yes,
some progress, we think. Early in 1936,
keywords, we think.
Haywood Patterson was convicted for a 4th time, but this time sentenced to 75 years in prison.
Okay.
And it's not that it's good. It's not good. It's just historic in that this was the first time in U.S. history where a black man was not sentenced to death for a crime against a white woman.
Okay. I mean, that's fascinating.
But I think that shows that it probably didn't happen. Right. But we're still going to give you 75 years so we can save face, right?
Yeah, yes.
So the next day, Ozzie Powell happened to be shot in the head after attacking a deputy sheriff with a penknife. Both men, however, survived. So here's what happened. The officer had been transporting Ozzie from one prison to another, and Ozzie was in fear of being murdered en route. Like, he thought they were going to just off him. And so he grabbed a pen, stabbed the cop in the neck, I think. But the officer saw it as an escape attempt, which is not what it was. He stopped the car and he shot him in the back of the head. They both lived, though.
But in what
condition? It'll come back, and I'll get back to that.
Okay.
Now, 7 of the 9 Scottsboro boys, as they were now being known as, were in prison for more than 6 years awaiting trial by the time jury selection began in the 3rd trial of Clarence Norris in July of 1937. It was like 100 degrees outside, so you can imagine how hot it probably was inside with all these people. And so they kind of rushed. Don't do that to me.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's all I can think about.
It's bad.
So
they really rushed the trial probably so they could go get a breath of fresh air. And then once again, Clarence gets the death penalty. Andy Wright's trial was next. He got 99 years with no evidence.
Yeah.
No evidence. Charlie Weems' jury came back with a 75-year sentence. And close to the same time, Ozzie, again, with his issues, was brought into court. And the new prosecutor announced that the state was dropping rape charges against him and that he was pleading guilty to assaulting a deputy. So they just switched it up.
Yeah.
The thing that we know you didn't do, we're going to supplant it with the thing we know you did do.
Yeah.
Even though he shouldn't have been in the deputy's care because he didn't do the first thing, right? He was sentenced to 20 years.
Interesting.
I don't understand math. I don't think they understand math, but it's really confusing me right now.
They did not understand.
I don't get it.
And I think, like you said, they're trying to save face or be merciful because I think they think they're required to be, but it's not. It's just
it's crazy.
Ridiculous.
Well, here's where things get a little more interesting. The prosecutor drops a bombshell announcing that all of the charges were being dropped against the remaining 4 defendants. So Willie Robertson, Olin Montgomery, Eugene Williams, and Roy Wright. He said that after, quote, careful consideration, end quote, every prosecutor was convinced that Robertson and Montgomery were not guilty.
Okay. It
So-
took careful consideration. How many years after you should have been giving it careful consideration?
Yeah. Too many years.
I mean, good for him for doing something right. Took you a really long time.
Too many years. So now we're up to 1938.
Okay.
We're 7 years later. Alabama Governor
I can do
Graves.
the math on that,
can,
just so you know.
Yeah. They commuted Norris's sentence to life imprisonment, but denied pardon applications by all 5 convicted defendants that same year. So again, we're going back to, we're going to do no, we're not. We're going to do the right thing. No, we're not.
Yeah.
But with time, Alabama officials eventually agreed to let 4 of them out on parole. So Charlie, Andrew, Clarence, and Ozzie. And that was after they collectively served more than 100 years in prison.
Wow.
So together for something they did not do.
Huh.
Clarence was the last surviving member of the Scottsboro Boys, received a pardon from Governor George Wallace in 1976.
Holy cow.
Governor Bentley at the time said, this has been a long time coming, but it's never too late to do the right thing. I think that's what well-intentioned people say to themselves. And while there is some truth in that, I am going to talk to you now about the lives of each of these young men after they got out of prison and weren't so young anymore.
Right.
And of course, the process of being wrongfully imprisoned and the things they endured ages you in a way that time doesn't,
Yes.
So 3 years later, for Norris, he publishes his book, The Last of the Scottsboro Boys. And 10 years later, he passes away.
Okay.
So it was 10 years of freedom.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it. So again, we talk about trauma, and there's obviously enough trauma to go around just due to the false accusations. But again, how their lives were forever changed due to these just lies. Someone else trying to cover their own butt so they don't get charged with a morals charge, which, my God, some of the laws in this country over the years have just been asinine. And I pulled from the story, the part I just told you, from a lot of sources. Those will all be in the show notes. But the bios that I'm going to go through now on all 9 of these young men was pulled from a PBS documentary called The American Experience feature. It was like really, really well done.
Okay.
So they're, kind of and maybe showcasing is not the right word, but demonstrating the context of how someone in this situation could be taken advantage of and played the way they were. And it's really, really heart-wrenching. So we'll start with Olin Montgomery. Olin had made it through the 5th grade, and he was the only defendant who could write at the time the 9 teenagers were arrested.
Oh, wow.
He had a cataract in one eye, and he had serious problems with his vision. He had been on the train that day to Memphis to look for work so he could buy new glasses. That's what he needed to do. He was 17 when he was arrested, and during all of the commotion, the only pair of glasses he had were broken. So he went 2 years before being allowed a new pair in prison. He didn't know any of the other young guys that he was sentenced to death with.
Okay.
But because he was the only one who could write, he wrote letters for the others to their family. He wrote poems, he played songs in prison, and when the charges were dropped against him in 1937, his attorney puts him on a train to New York. So he buys himself a guitar and a saxophone. He begins taking music lessons, but his idea and dream of paying his way in life through his music, it didn't really pan out. So he ends up in Detroit, where after a night of drinking, he passes out on the bed of a girlfriend. Landlady discovers them and accuses him of rape.
Oh, my.
And the charge was dropped 2 days later, but it was just like, here we go again. He spent the rest of his life drinking.
Oh.
So it's just sad.
Yeah.
Clarence Norris. He was the son of a former slave. So he was born free, but he worked in the fields of his family's sharecrop starting at age 7. Minimal schooling. His father died pretty early, so he had to begin working for wages to help support his family. So he was 19 when he boarded that train in search for work, but was instead arrested with 8 other boys he didn't know. And his time in jail was horrible. He was one who could hear those executions from the cell adjacent to his.
That gives me the heebie-jeebies.
Isn't it awful?
No, it's not okay.
It's heartbreaking.
Ugh.
He went through 3 trials like we've talked about. He's finally released after 3 death sentences, and he flees north, which understandably so. Get the hell out of the South, right? 1944, he was talked back into going back to Alabama to assist as an advocate. So I think he thought,
yeah. All right. Fair.
Just wait. Okay, so he's going to assist as an advocate for men in similar situations. He was promised leniency, but he was returned to prison again.
Oh, my.
So it's just a bait and switch.
Yep.
Paroled in 1946. This time he pieced out of Alabama and assumed his brother's identity. Got married, got divorced a couple times, arrested a few times for gun possession and gambling and stabbing a girlfriend. By the 1960s, he was living with a 3rd wife and their children in Brooklyn. And this entire time, he's obviously in violation of his parole.
Okay.
He's assumed a different identity, right? But he was afraid of his children learning about his past. So in 1973, he was still considered a wanted man. So he wanted to get this cleared up. He engaged the help of the NAACP to request a pardon. But Alabama required him to turn himself in first so that they could reinstate his parole before they would consider a pardon.
Yeah,
I wouldn't go back.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go back. But with the help of NAACP, there was a campaign launch that would make it really hard PR-wise not to grant a pardon. Okay. And the pardon was granted. You just need the right political pressure. right? To do the right thing. I mean, it's sick.
Certainly with some people, that is the motivator.
It's awful.
Yeah.
So pardon was granted in October of 1976, and he was officially declared not guilty of the Scottsboro incident. His comment on the pardon, quote, "The lesson to Black people, to my children, to everybody, is that you should always fight for your rights, even if it costs you your life. Stand up for your rights, even if it kills you. That's all life consists of."
Huh.
He released an autobiography in 1979 and began public speaking. In the 1980s, he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he died in 1989.
Wow. Yeah.
Hopefully the first things he forgot were all of that horror.
Right.
One
Yeah.
can hope. Okay, Haywood Patterson. He was quoted as saying, "I'd rather die than spend another day in jail for something I didn't do," after being sentenced to 75 years. So he requested the death sentence. They didn't give it to him. Haywood was born in 1913, started working at 14 years old. He was 18 when he and his friends, so I told you there was a few of them that did know each other. So Eugene Williams and then Leroy and Andrew Wright boarded the train. They were all together.
Okay.
He admitted to fighting with the white boys and forcing them off the train. So he owned it. He's like, yeah, I did that. So he was shocked when the charges came back as rape. He's like, wait, what? Wait, did you not hear the words that I said?
Yeah.
You know? And while in prison, he said he regretted having skipped school because now he's in prison and he's just trapped there. He said, quote, "I held a pencil in my hand, but I couldn't tap the power that was in it." But he did teach himself to read. He used a dictionary and a Bible. He was not very well liked, so he was always on guard against assaults in prison, both physical and sexual. And so to avoid being further victimized, this just breaks my heart. It's kind of like victimize or be victimized. So he became a predator and kept a gal boy. In February of 1941, a guard paid one of Patterson's friends to kill him. He got stabbed 20 times, resulting in a punctured lung that nearly killed him, but he somehow recovered.
Whoa.
Yeah, resilient is like crazy.
Yeah.
He escaped from prison once and fled to Detroit, but was caught by the FBI. But Michigan's governor at the time refused to let him be extradited to Alabama.
Okay.
So he started working with a journalist to write his autobiography, Scottsboro Boy, which was published in 1950. Later that year, however, he was arrested in December of that year after a bar fight that resulted in a death by stabbing.
Ooh.
Once again, he was put through 3 trials. His first trial resulted in a hung jury. Second was a mistrial. And after his third trial, he was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 6 to 15 years. He served only 1, but he died of cancer in jail before his. So didn't end well for him either. Ozzie Powell, the one that attacked the cop. He was born also in Georgia in 1916. Started working 14 years old. You know, he didn't have much schooling. He worked at like camps and sawmills. He was looking for his next job on the train that day, too. He admitted at Haywood's trial that he had, in fact, followed the other boys who were going to throw the white boys off the train, but that he'd never met the other young 8 black men he was arrested with. So, and remember, you asked, like, okay, so he survived the shot in the head.
Yeah.
But hey, my husband's okay.
I know. I think of that sometimes, but it just seems so unlikely.
Yeah.
Most
In this
of the
case,
time.
though, he did have permanent brain damage.
Yeah.
Yeah. His mom visited him in the hospital, and he was reported to have said, "I done give up. I feel like everybody in Alabama is down on me and is mad with me."
Yeah.
So,
Pretty
and
much.
they said that
He's not
he
wrong.
had an IQ of about 64 and a mental age of about 9.
Oh.
I'm sorry, but people in that kind of mental state, that mental level of, they should not be in prison with predators.
Correct.
But yeah, so he was paroled in 1946, somehow returned to Georgia to live out the rest of his days. Not sure what kind of quality there was there.
Right.
Willie Robertson. He was born 1915, Columbus, Georgia. Started out life, he was born on the 4th of July, like my sister. When he was a month old, his dad left his family. Mom died when he was 2, so he was sent to be raised by a grandmother until her death in 1930. He made it to 7th grade, but he still had an IQ of only 64, just like Ozzie, and a mental age of around 9, just like Ozzie.
Wow.
So he couldn't read or write. He had difficulty speaking, and this really made me mad. I guess he was the butt of a lot of courtroom spectators' jokes during all of this process.
Oh.
Yeah.
What is wrong with people?
All the
there was a
things.
lot of things
All
wrong
the
at that
things were
time,
wrong
but
with people. So Willie had been on the Memphis train that day to find free medical care for some STDs that he had. So he was in a lot of pain and lying down in the train like he wasn't participating in anything. That's when he was rounded up and arrested and accused of rape.
Yeah.
He's literally too ill to do anything. His attorneys argued that he could not have committed the rape due to the state he was in, but when Ruby Bates was treated for syphilis herself, his disease was cited as proof of his guilt.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
Eeh.
He was not given the appropriate medical attention for his health issues until 1933.
Yeah.
Upon his release, he settled into steady work in New York City, but he still had ill health from being untreated for so long. And then in Harlem one night, bar fight broke out. He was not involved, but he was arrested.
Oh, geez.
And charged with disorderly conduct. And while he was in jail, his health conditions worsened, and he eventually died of an asthma attack in jail. Yeah. Charlie also had a lot of trauma and instability as a young kid. I mean, it's just a cookie cutter at this point. Right?
Yeah.
His mom died when he was 4. 6 of his 7 siblings died soon thereafter.
Whoa.
Yeah, whoa. Then his father gets sick, so he's sent to live with an aunt. He's on his way back home to Tennessee when he was pulled from the train and arrested. So he was just trying to get back home. He was 19 at the time, had never met any of the other young men that he was arrested with. And after that initial Scottsboro trial, Charlie was not tried again until July of 1937.
Oh.
So he sat in prison all those years,
Yeah.
6 years, ultimately being sentenced to 75 years. And while in prison, he was caught reading ILD literature, and the wardens, or whatever they're called, they tear gassed him for it. Yeah. So because of that, he had like residual eye problems from the tear gas and some like lung issues. He ended up with tuberculosis. It was just crazy. March of that next year, a case of mistaken identity. He was stabbed with a knife by the prison mill foreman. It's just
Just a violent environment.
just awful.
Yeah.
Eugene was one of the youngest of the 9 at that time. He was the one that was only 13, traveling from Chattanooga to Memphis to look for work with his friends.
Right.
After release, he was in the entertainment career industry for a brief time, and then he moved to St. Louis, where he had relatives who actually helped him build a normal and stable life.
Oh, good.
So he made it out. Andrew was 19 at the time he was arrested, and he had had enough schooling where he could read. He could maybe write a little. After his 99-year sentence for the false rape, he was assaulted by both prison guards and prisoners and spent time in the prison hospital. He was in very poor health, which made it hard to work in the prison industries that they had. And that's what drew the wrath of his abusers, because he couldn't carry his own weight. So he narrowly escaped an attack when Charlie took his shift at the prison mill and received knife wounds intended for Andy. So remember the mistaken identity?
Yes.
That's what it was.
Okay.
So as bad as the physical punishment was, the psychological torture that these young men endured might have even been worse. According to Andy, he wrote, quote, "A colored convict's very best behavior is not good enough for these officials here." And he talked about how you'd be cursed at, you'd be kicked around and beat like dogs. And he was really good-natured, but finally struggled with depression. And in November 43, he received parole, but was sent back to by the Work Parole Board in Montgomery. So it was no better than prison, so he took off. He fled north.
Okay.
And later he was persuaded to return to Alabama so that Haywood's and Ozzy's parole hearings might have more favorable results. But like Clarence, he was promised leniency. Do you think he was told the truth too? No, he was also lied to. They locked him up as soon as he returned. So he's paroled again in 1950, where then he goes to work in Albany. And then he's once again accused of rape a year later by a former girlfriend, claiming he raped her 13-year-old foster daughter. He claimed he'd only bought a gift for the girl, and his story was later confirmed by detectives hired by the NAACP. So he was actually acquitted by an all-white jury after spending another 8 months in jail.
But yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So he believed his experience in Scottsboro was haunting him and he could never escape it, and his bad fortune continued. It became harder to find work. And then in a fight with his wife a year later, he stabbed her. I'm trying to think of all the boyfriends I've been mad at. I don't think I ever wanted to stab anybody. I don't know. And although she lived and didn't press charges, he was forced out of New York.
Sure.
So ended up in Connecticut and then the trail goes cold on him. And then Roy Wright, left home at 13 years old to look for work with his older brother Andy and their friends, Patterson and Eugene. And at the initial trial, Roy testified that he hadn't seen some of the other defendants rape the two girls. But later he claimed that testimony had been coerced. Mm-hmm. To a former interview with a New York Times reporter, he said to them, "They whipped me, and it seemed like they were going to kill me." Mm-hmm. So all that time, they kept saying, "Will you tell me now? Will you tell now?"
Right.
And so I couldn't stand it no more, he said, and I said yes. So that's how that happened. Ended with a hung jury in his case, with 11 jurors seeking a death sentence and 1 voting for life in prison. So that was the only trial Roy had, and he spent the next 6 years in jail. He was in cart and transport to Birmingham and handcuffed to Ozzie Powell when Powell slashed the deputy with a knife and was shot in return. So imagine being handcuffed to a man being shot.
Right.
You can't get away. In January of 1937, at age now 19, he told a visitor, "If I have to spend more than 1 or 2 years longer, might as well just spend the rest of my life here. Because what else am I going to know?" And he was smart. He liked to read. He kept a Bible with him. And he refrained from reading magazines or newspapers because he didn't want to see other people's happy lives. So he tried to, that's how he tried to protect his mental health.
Sure.
Which was actually really smart. And then when the 3 others were released, they got together and they joined a vaudeville circuit. And then they're trying anything to make money, and
Sure.
to make their way. They went on for a 2.5-month tour organized by the Scottsboro Defense Committee, and it was like a speaking tour. So they spoke in more than 40 cities to raise money and awareness for his brother Andy and the others still in jail. And that attracted the attention of a famous black entertainer, Bojangles, Bojangles Robinson. And he offered to pay for Roy's education at a vocational school.
Okay.
So that was cool. Mm-hmm. Then he joined the Army. He served as a merchant marine. He got married. And I really thought that maybe, because we have the one that
we have kind
made
of
it
one
at
semi-happy
maybe
ending.
we have 2. But I literally cried when I learned this next part. In 1959, upon returning home from a tour at sea in the Merchant Marines, found his wife with another man. He killed her and then returned to his apartment and his Bible and shot himself.
Oh.
So
1 out of the 9.
1 out of the 9.
Had a kind of sort of semi-normal life.
Yes.
Several years post false conviction.
And ask me what happened to the people who wrongfully accused.
Nothing.
And lied. It wasn't even
I don't even need to ask you. I know what happened.
I misunderstood the situation.
No.
I thought I was telling you the truth at the time.
Yeah.
They just fabricated it.
Yep.
Anything to these women, to these the white boys that got kicked off the train.
If you were the woman who did end up...
damn thing.
Yeah. If you were the woman who ended up recanting first and trying, I mean, the level of guilt you would feel.
Yeah.
Knowing that
Victoria,
all of this
though.
is, she's the devil. But
I wish I could find something on her.
you couldn't.
No.
Yeah, nothing
She
happened.
probably had just a fine, sweet little life, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully the guilt gave her cancer or something, but we'll never know.
So one escape artist among the 9 and the
the
others
9.
really suffered forever for what happened.
For looking
So
for work,
sad.
for trying to help out their situation, for trying to go raise money to buy a new set of glasses. I mean, for just surviving.
Yep.
That this story it really gripped me, and I'd never heard it. I don't remember now how I stumbled across it, but
Right. We hear a lot about
me
kind
so
of the
mad.
same figures that helped lead us to what became like the civil rights movement. But some of those other ones, I mean, I don't think the Deep South
they
wants
don't
you
get
to know.
a lot of exposure.
Some of them, some places would prefer you didn't hear those stories. And no offense to people living in those places today, but certainly
Well, it's the people that make
historically-
it up, right? So
Yeah.
it's not the Deep South itself.
Correct, yeah.
Geographically speaking, it's the small-mindedness and the people. There's a story I'm working on right now that is more recent, and
equally as frustrating.
it's equally as it's bad.
Well, I think even more recently, and I don't remember if the person was white, black, or something else, But there was a case we've talked about where like DNA didn't show the person had any connection to the victim, and yet
Yes.
it didn't matter. It's like, but.
But we want you to be guilty. We want it to be
We've
you.
made up our mind.
We want to wrap this up in a
Yeah.
bow. We just want to go home at night and not have to keep working and like thinking, because that's really hard, Julie.
I know. But on that point, I will say I also know, and you also know, people who would never in a million years in those positions of authority, police officers, detectives, judges, lawyers, who would ever in a million years intentionally betray someone in that way, that they wouldn't give them a chance. Like we know, I know far more of the people who want everybody
who
to
stay
have
up
a
at
fair
night,
shot.
who are trying to figure it out, who are trying to.
But the ones who don't are devils in disguise.
Yeah.
Like they ruin lives.
Yeah,
for sure. Can we take a break? Because that was a doozy.
Absolutely.
Do you like how I call everything that's like horrifying just a doozy? It's like my personal way of like skimming over it.
Yeah.
I've noticed
Charity,
that.
I won't sleep at night. Thank you.
That was a doozy.
Yeah.
All right. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. Hello, escape artists out there. Quick public service announcement. You hear us talk on the Escape Pod about the One Heart campus. To learn more about this place for hope and healing where lives are changed for the better, listen to the prologue episode at escapepod.live or wherever you get your podcasts, or visit oneheartrc.org. Welcome back into the Escape Pod, everybody. Thanks for listening today. Before we wrap up what has been quite the history lesson in the Escape Pod, thank you, even though it was horrifying. But we do need to hear those stories and be reminded that humans do terrible things to each other, and we need to be on the right side of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no excuse for just being a terrible human being. So on that note, what are you escaping to? What would you like to be doing, or
what would I
hope
like
to be doing soon? What do you get to do that you look forward to doing?
Well, I'll tell you
soon?
what, like I told you after the whole Rochester thing,
yes,
we came back. I thought just self-care. I'm going to chill. I'm going to read a book.
Okay.
I can't do it. All I started doing was, is there anything I can purge from my home? Because of what I had just endured.
I know.
I'm like, I can't do this to my kids. If I'm taken off the planet tomorrow, I have to make sure that they don't have mountains of to go through. Like, so and then I'd say, okay, that's enough now, Charity. You did these rooms and this closet and, you sit down. And then I'd sit down for 10 minutes. Oh, I can do that too. And then I just could not do it. So I'm exhausted.
Good for you.
Well, but now it's like, now they're back and we're setting up my mother-in-law's condo.
Yeah.
And so every night is getting that all together. My husband's off all week. He's doing nothing but helping her get acclimated. But so all I really want to escape to is like normalcy. Yeah. But I don't know when that's going to be.
Yeah,
like where I just peacefully pass out into the bliss of sleep at like 8 or 8:30.
Yeah.
And then wake up at my normal time without any, because I also disrupted sleep because of stress, and all that kind of a thing. So I would just really love that.
Yeah. Well, I hope you get it.
I don't know how I'm going to do it.
I did, when I was walking into work today, I said to the front desk woman who we adore, how is it only Wednesday? Because I feel
you
like
too?
the first 2 days
I
of
thought
this week.
Wednesday was Monday.
Oh.
I mean, I'm like, and then today I had a doctor appointment this morning, and I'm like, she said, yeah, it's Wednesday. And I went, it's not Thursday?
I'm convinced
no.
I've been busy enough in the first 2 days of the week that I had to be through 4 days. Like, how are we
I
not
was that way
Friday?
on Tuesday. Yeah, I'm a mess. And I mean, granted, I am playing catch up, but I'm still like,
nope, that was my...
And I was so excited to come back.
Yeah.
Just to not be dealing with that other stuff.
Well, and routine is nice. Like, routine is
great.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I'm escaping to our little coffee shop. I'm going to head over to Homebrew when we're done here.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to do it tomorrow when it's over 40 degrees. And yeah, it's going to be nice tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, for a day.
For a day. But it's a day long enough for me to get the big plants out of my house that go to my mother-in-law's condo. Okay. It's been too cold to transport them. So we can take them to their new home tomorrow.
Excellent.
But
right.
Yeah. So
we'll get there.
I take that back. I was going to say I have resisted just getting hammered as an escape. But I have to say, this is kind of funny. This is actually really funny. It's not funny. It's terrible. So we're in Rochester, and there was a whole day. Thank God my mother-in-law does not listen to this podcast. I don't even think she knows at 87 years old what a podcast is.
Probably not.
Which is good for me. I love her dearly. I love her dearly. People don't like change.
No.
She's 87, Depression era. You don't throw anything away. Her home, beautiful. Like it's not a Victorian style home in construction, but the interior, it is like going back in time. And it has been that way for 34 years. Not a thing has changed. Yeah. And it's like frozen in time. It's in great shape, beautiful, but just like dated, right? And so when I say people don't like change, she takes this to a nuclear level, like it is. And so one day it was cold shouldering us all morning. And so Sierra and I were like, we have to get out of this house. Okay. So we figured out some things, some errands we could go do, which is still helping move her along, just not with her. Yeah. And we gave her a break from us. We went and got some house keys made in case she locked us out of the house, because that was a very real possibility that day. We're like, she's going to lock us out. So we snuck her keys out of her purse and went and got copies made because we thought it was coming. So we go and do errands, and then we go to our favorite restaurant anytime we're in Rochester, and we started drinking mimosas. And we didn't want to go back, and we just kept sitting there going, okay, one more, just one more. So I ended up just getting blitzed. I regretted that decision. So that was me trying to escape in Rochester in the bitter cold. Yeah. It was so awful. That deep, deep freeze we all had. It was really bad in Minnesota. That was during that time. So
I had a boss many years ago who had an elderly mother who willingly moved into an apartment and willingly gave up her car keys. Because she recognized it was time. And I remember saying to my boss at the time how lucky she was that that's how her mother handled aging, because it's so unusual. It is so unusual. And I get it to some extent. I don't love change now, and I'm 40 something. So it's understandable.
I don't mind it. Like, I do like routine, but like updating my house and freshening things. I like, new and making progress and moving forward and that kind of a thing.
Right. Nothing. But this is a big move for a woman who, as you said, was in a home for 34 years.
She is 100 pounds if she's lucky.
Yeah.
4 foot, 8, 9, little tiny, itty bitty human being. This itty bitty human being, the amount of possessions she had. Yeah. Was so disproportionate. And the amount of clothes. Okay, get this. Two more things. Because this is bananas. First of all, when we were there over the holidays, for years she's been saying, Charity's taking all my Santas. So she has this crazy people. She says hundreds. I'm pretty sure it's in the thousands.
Oh, wow.
Santas coming out of my ears. And so at Christmas, she shows me the room down in the basement. So it's not finished, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rooms. So it's a big home. Where everything is. And I kind of look at it and I'm like, okay, yeah, I know what size trailer I can get. I can probably get all of this. It's fine. I was lied to.
There's more.
So it was that whole room, and it was half of the next room, and it was a whole wall in a third room, and then it was every closet in the spare bedrooms upstairs. And I'm just like, are you effing kidding me? Yeah. So I'm hauling and I'm hauling and I'm hauling. And I finally said, I can't take any more. The rest have to go with the estate sale. I don't know what to do. So she was not happy about that. But then clothes. Okay, so her husband passed away 2.5 years ago. Yes. She has a walk-in closet. At one point, they shared that closet. Now that he's gone, she's filled it up. She abhors a space. His chest of drawers now filled with her clothes. Every closet in the home filled with her clothes. Okay. Downstairs in the basement, 8 pop-up closets. So like you can
closets?
Zip. Yeah. That
like
kind of
portable.
Roll around. Yeah. 8 filled with clothes.
So did she go on shopping sprees that you didn't know about?
No, she shopped. She worked in retail. Okay. So she had a pulse on that, but Some stuff still has tags on it. Some
Yeah.
stuff she hasn't worn in 30 years.
Yep.
And she wanted to take it all. And I'm like, you can't. So the day that we were starting on the clothes, Sierra has the patience of a saint.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing fits her anymore. She's shrunk. Like she's tiny.
Yep.
So none of this stuff fit. And Sierra got her through most of it in 2 rooms, not her main closet.
Okay.
And by the time we tag teamed and my husband came and then his brother came, we left. And then so husbands, my niece, my now future sister-in-law, so brother-in-law's fiance, and then some friends were helping her with the clothes. And I guess World War III ensued.
Oh.
Someone got locked out of her room. She locked someone out of her room. And she's like an angel. Fortunately, all the fighting that we endured there has been none of that since we've moved her here.
Good.
She's been her sweet self, still overwhelmed, understandably
Of course.
so.
Yes.
But her sweet self and grateful and all of that stuff. So it's like, okay, she's still in there. But it's been a lot.
It's a hard time of life.
Just so much stuff.
I will tell you, after we went through 2 houses of things in the last year,
Your uncles.
my brother said they went on a trip with my parents last summer. And my brother said, I did not buy so much as a magnet. I want to take nothing home with me.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, all of us to some extent, our mindsets have really changed about things, because the truth is, even though it's a cliche, but it is the truth, you cannot take it with you when you go.
Yeah.
And somebody has to deal with it.
Yep.
And so your children will thank you for your purging tendencies right now.
I just keep telling him, be kind to me. Because
I
I'll
tell
know
my
how to
kids,
stick it to you if you
end
end
up
up
in
being
a nice nursing home. Put your mom in a nice nursing home. One day, our old neighbor, I might have told this story on the podcast before, but our old neighbor, who's a dear friend, had knee surgery. And my youngest son at the time was still like a toddler. And he just couldn't stop looking at the scar on her knee.
Mm-hmm.
He just thought that was fascinating. And I was trying to do like osmosis, like, you should be an orthopedic surgeon and put your mom in a nice nursing. There you go. Yeah. So I keep
So you
trying.
whisper in his ear while he's sleeping? Okay.
Well, I mean, I whispered in his ear right there. And I do still kind of tell him, like, whatever you do, make sure you can put mom in a nice nursing home.
That's right.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We appreciate every single one of our listeners. If you like what you heard, please share with a friend who you think might like it too. We're a small team here. We do this in basically our spare time, which doesn't exist, but we call it spare time anyway. One day we hope to be
Wishful
able to
thinking.
provide. It is wishful thinking. It's a pipe dream.
Yeah.
But we do hope to
Optimism.
provide operational support for the nonprofit where we work, called One Heart, where our mission is empowering people to overcome crisis and achieve self-sustainability.
That's right. We're a true podcast for a cause, so you can really feel good about spreading the word and helping us increase our listenership. So please rate and review, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast. It really helps us gain more exposure and more listeners.
Yes, and we are growing.
We are
so
growing, but
keep
one
us
day
going.
it'll equal more ad revenue, hopefully. You can check us out on our website at escapepod.live. You can link us on social media accounts from there. You can reach out to us at justbecause@escapepod.live. Tell us what you think, or maybe a topic idea of something maybe you've escaped, or you can share your own escape story with us at escapeartist@escapepod.live.
We are closing the hatch on this episode of the Escape Pod. Remember, trauma may be inevitable, but how you grapple with it is optional. So stay resilient
And keep laughing.